Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. In the quiet town of Riverside, nestled against the winding river and embraced by dense woodlands, the atmosphere was often eerie, underscored by the chorus of nature. The town, with its white picket fences and quaint shops lining Main Street, held secrets that lay just beneath the surface. On a late autumn evening, the air was thick with dampness, the setting sun casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. As leaves spiraled down from skeletal trees, an unsettling feeling settled over the community. It began when Mrs. Lila Greene, known for her sharp wit and too bright cardigan collection, failed to show up for her weekly breakfast at Grace's dinner staple of Riverside. For years, her presence had been a constant, a thread woven into the fabric of the town. When her friends noticed her absence, concern brewed like the dark coffee that filled the diner. Days turned into a week, and whispers of worry began to ricochet around the town like echoes in a cave. The local sheriff's office dispatched a patrol car to her home, a modest two-story house adorned with vibrant flower boxes and a rickety porch swing. What began as a simple welfare check would swiftly evolve into a harrowing search. Inside, they found her belongings untouched, the calendar still marked with the day of her disappearance, a single slice of uneaten pie left on the kitchen counter. Darker on the street. In an instant, Riverside held its breath, the tranquility of the past now shattered by a chilling uncertainty. The victim. Lila Greene was a fixture in Riverside, a life woven into the town's tapestry. At 62, her laugh echoed through the tight-knit community, an infectious warmth that brightened gray days. Folks often spoke of her kindness, recalling how she'd bake cookies for the local charity and tend to her neighbors' gardens when the weather shrank their ambitions. She was a skilled seamstress, known for crafting handmade quilts that told stories of the families to whom they were gifted. Each patch she pieced together represented a personal history, intertwining her life with those around her. At the annual Riverside fairs, Lila's booth always attracted admirers, not just for her craftsmanship, but for her genuine interest in the lives of others. Yet Lila wasn't without her troubles. She had faced emotional turmoil with the passing of her husband a few years earlier, a loss that left a void she struggled to fill. Friends had noticed her retreat into solitude since then, but they chalked it up to grief, a natural response, they thought. Many of them had touched base with her, some encouraging her to join a support group, others simply checking to see how she was holding up. Lila, ever the optimist, would smile, assuring them she was fine. But now, as her absence dragged on, the community began to unravel the layers of her life. Questions grew like weeds in a neglected garden. Had she been the cheerful facade everyone had? Each friend who recalled their last conversation began piecing together a puzzle, the pieces oddly shaped and far from fitting. The crime scene. The next day, Sheriff Frank Ramirez and his deputy, Liz Hart, arrived at Lila Greene's home, armed with the knowledge that their simple welfare check had escalated into something far more significant. As they approached the quaint structure, a lingering unease hung in the air, thick as the morning fog rolling in from the river. The well-tended garden, once a riot of colors, now seemed to hold an oppressive sense of dread, petals wilting as if mourning the occupant. Inside, the house remained still, a silence that was both unsettling and heavy. The sheriff glanced around the living room. A half-finished knitting project lay on the armrest of her recliner, the yarn subtly fraying at the edges. Nearby, a small framed photo of Lila and her husband on their wedding day sat proudly atop the mantel, untouched, yet shadowed by an absence that enveloped the room. As they moved cautiously through the narrow hall, they noted the scents that permeated the space, a faded floral air, freshener layered over something earthy and musty. The kitchen was surreal in its stillness, a stark contrast to the bustling life that once animated it. A pot of water sat neglected on the stove, a sliver of abandonment lingering in the air. But it was the basement door, slightly ajar, that beckoned their attention. Steeling themselves, the officers descended the creaking steps, the light flickering with each footfall. The basement was cluttered, filled with boxes stacked high, remnants of a life once filled with laughter. An unsettling feeling washed over them as they caught sight of the cold concrete floor, the jagged edges reflecting the somber reality of their situation. With every moment passing, they couldn't shake the sense that stillness can sometimes harbor chaos, a silence that often screamed louder than any shout. The early investigation. As news of Lila Greene's disappearance spread through Riverside, it ignited a mix of concern and disbelief. The sheriff's office quickly mobilized a small team of officers to sift through the initial details, driven by an unsettling realization that they were not just looking for a missing person, but potentially investigating a crime. Sheriff Ramirez gathered his team in the small, windowless room of the precinct, the smell of stale coffee permeating the air. Overhead lights flickered with the low hum of tension. With their investigation in its infancy, they understood the importance of gathering every available piece of evidence and witness statement. "Let's start with her friends and neighbors," he ordered, eyeing each officer around the table. "We need to know who last saw her and if she displayed any unusual behavior recently. Was there anyone who seemed out of place around her?" With their assignments set, the deputies spread out across town, starting at the diner where Lila had often been a fixture. Grace, the diner's owner, recalled their last conversation, her brow furrowed in thought. "She seemed a bit off," she mentioned, a hint of concern in her voice. "Said she wasn't sleeping well lately, worried about something, but she didn't elaborate." As officers interviewed neighbors, they discovered curious details. Mrs. Thompson, who lived next door, noted that she had seen a black sedan parked outside Lila's house on several occasions in the past month. Nothing out of the ordinary. "Just thought it was a visitor," she shrugged. Yet, the implication lingered in the air. Who had been visiting? Meanwhile, a young couple at the edge of town reported seeing Lila's yard light flickering persistently the night before she disappeared. It was odd, the woman admitted, like someone was trying to get attention. As they pieced these fragments together, an unsettling thread began to emerge, hinting that Lila's disappearance might not just be an unfortunate accident. The dead ends. As the investigation unfolded, the initial spark of hope began to dim. Days turned into a week, and the whirlwind of activity, complaints and rumors gave way to lingering frustration. Sheriff Ramirez and his team filed through witness statements and leads, each building a narrative that turned murky with time. The black sedan turned out to belong to a distant relative of Lila's, who had been in town to help clean out her late husband's belongings. The relative had left long before Lila vanished. As for the flickering yard light, there was no electrical malfunction found, but the explanation felt hollow in light of the growing uncertainty surrounding Lila's fate. Back at the precinct, the team gathered around a corkboard festooned with photos, timelines, and scribbled notes. Ramirez rubbed the back of his neck, tension tightening his muscles. "Hell, I can't shake this feeling that we're missing something obvious," he murmured. The interviews with friends and family revealed snippets of gossip, but little of substance. Lila's former coworkers spoke fondly of her, highlighting the small disagreements she had on various projects. Yet nothing out of the ordinary. Even those who expressed concern couldn't identify any enemies or disputes, leaving investigators scratching their heads. A visit to Lila's home yielded no new leads, only haunting reminders of life left behind. The unfinished knitting project lay dormant, enveloped in dust. The local shop where she'd bought groceries remained sympathetic, but had no key insights to share. As hours turned to days, leads trickled into dead ends, each seeming less significant than the last. With every passing moment, the stark reality weighed heavily. They were losing time. The pressure began mounting, not just from the community, but from the isolation of a silence that whispered secrets they could not decipher. A break in the case. The gray clouds that had lingered over Riverside finally opened up, releasing a deluge that echoed the town's desolation. As Sheriff Ramirez sat in his office reviewing the same notes for the umpteenth time, the phone rang, slicing through the silence. He grabbed it on the first ring, his heart fluttering with a mixture of hope and dread. "Sheriff, you need to come to the station," Deputy Hart exclaimed breathlessly. "We just got a call from someone who might have seen something." With adrenaline coursing through his veins, Ramirez raced to the station, the downpour soaking through his jacket. He arrived to find Hart huddled over the dispatch log, excitement bubbling in her voice. A woman named Jenna, on the outskirts of town, claimed she saw a car parked by Lila's house the night she went missing. She thought it looked suspicious. Drawing in a deep breath, Ramirez reviewed the detail. Jenna was a waitress at the local diner, known for keeping an ear to the ground during slow shifts. After getting an address, the sheriff and deputy jumped into their cruiser and navigated to Jenna's small bungalow, nestled among tall pines that swayed in the storm. When they arrived, Jenna greeted them with an anxious expression, her hands wringing together. "Yes." "I hesitated to say anything," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But I can't shake the feeling that it was important." The car was idling, but no one got out. It was a dark Jeep, looked like it had tinted windows. "I thought it might have been someone she knew, but..." "Did you see any faces?" Ramirez probed, studying her intently. "I didn't, but I saw it linger for a long time longer than I felt comfortable." With Jenna's account fresh in his mind, the sheriff felt the first spark of renewed urgency. They had a new lead, a tangible piece of the puzzle that could unravel the mystery of Lila Greene's disappearance. But just as quickly as hope ignited, doubt crept in. Who was the occupant of that vehicle, and why had they lingered outside Lila's home? As the rain continued to pour, the air felt electric with the promise of revelation. They were finally on the cusp of something bigger. The suspect, with Jenna's account serving as a new beacon of hope, the investigation took a decisive turn. Sheriff Ramirez and Deputy Hart focused on tracking down the dark Jeep, its owner, a mystery shrouded in shadow. They enlisted the help of local auto repair shops and gas stations, combing through surveillance footage from the days leading up to Lila's disappearance. It was at a gas station a few blocks away where their search met its first solid lead. A clerk recognized the description of the Jeep and recalled a man who had left the pumps running while he hurried in to pay. "He seemed agitated," she remarked, her brows knitting together in concern. "He was in and out really fast." "Ah, I didn't think much of it until now." A quick review of security footage confirmed everything. The man was tall, with dark hair adorned by a baseball cap pulled low. He had a rugged presence, something that stuck with the clerk, and he paid in cash. As they obtained a clearer image of the man, an unsettling realization dawned. He was a former resident of Riverside, known to have had a brief but tumultuous relationship with Lila years prior. Ramirez called on his team to dig deeper. Battling past wounds, they found that the man had left town under a cloud of suspicion after a contentious split. Rumors circulated that he had harbored ill feelings toward Lila for moving on after their relationship ended. As the investigation intensified, they discovered he hadn't been seen in town for years, but had resurfaced shortly before her disappearance. The sheriff felt a chill run through him. The threads connecting this man to Lila's case were thickening, and they needed to track him down before he slipped away again. Back at the precinct, the team worked swiftly, piecing together a timeline that would allow them to follow his movements since his return to Riverside. As they prepared to search for him, the sensation of impending confrontation hung heavily in the air. Lila's story was unfolding, entangled with someone who once belonged to her past, and that realization carried both promise and peril. The trial. The courtroom was a stark, sterile environment, heavy with tension as the trial of David Caldwell commenced. The walls, painted a dull gray, seemed to absorb the anxious energy of those gathered to hear a case that had gripped Riverside. Onlookers filled the benches, their familiarity with Lila Greene evident in the tear-stained cheeks and murmurs that rippled through the crowd. Sheriff Ramirez and Deputy Hart sat in the front row, bracing themselves for the confrontations that would unfold. The trial marked the culmination of a lengthy investigation, leading to Caldwell's arrest under circumstantial evidence stemming from Lila's sudden disappearance and the ominous history between them. The prosecution laid out their case methodically, weaving together witness testimonials, forensic evidence, and surveillance footage that displayed Caldwell's presence in town at the critical moments. Details were revealed about the dark Jeep that had been spotted outside Lila's home and the unsettling nature of his return to Riverside after years of absence. Each piece of evidence seemed to weigh heavily, anchoring the gravity of the situation. Caldwell's defense attorney countered with skill, painting him as a man wrongfully accused. He argued that mere proximity to Lila's home was not indicative of wrongdoing, challenging the validity of the prosecution's claims. The emotions in the room shifted like the wind through the trees outside, mirroring the heated back and forth between the two sides. As testimony unfolded, Lila's friends took the stand, recounting memories that underscored her kindness and resilience. Pain punctuated their words, like a persistent echo of loss that lingered in the air. Among them was Mrs. Thompson, who tearfully described Lila's transformation over the years, revealing the shadow of lingering trauma that had followed her after the dissolution of her relationship with Caldwell. Each witness added layers of complexity to the case, weaving the narrative of a woman well-loved yet deeply troubled. The more the prosecution built their case, the further the courtroom atmosphere thickened with a dread that stretched beyond those present. As the judge called for a recess, the gathering outside buzzed with speculation and lingering hope. The community of Riverside collectively held its breath, waiting for justice to unfurl in the face of uncertainty. The aftermath. As the trial concluded, a palpable stillness settled over Riverside, the kind that follows a storm, heavy and charged with unresolved tension. The jury's deliberation hung like a dark cloud, stretching into interminable hours as the townsfolk awaited the verdict that would determine not just Caldwell's fate, but the resolution of Lila Greene's tragic disappearance. When the verdict finally echoed through the courtroom, it felt as if time had halted. Not guilty. The words resonated like a chilling bell tolling through the air, punctuating the courtroom with disbelief and dismay. Gasps filled the room, and tears flowed freely from those who had held on to hope, whispering silent prayers that the truth would prevail. Outside, the town was awash in anguish. The familiar streets of Riverside, which had shared Lila's laughter and warmth, now felt hollow, as if the sun had been blotted out. Friends and neighbors huddled together, their conversations marred by confusion and anger. How could this happen? Echoed through the gathering crowd as the reality of Caldwell's acquittal settled over them. Sheriff Ramirez grappled with a sense of failure, burdened by the weight of the community's grief. For him, Lila had represented not only the light of Riverside, but also the vulnerability that exists when one is left behind. The unanswered questions loomed large, a cacophony of thoughts that pricked at his consciousness. Had they done enough? Was there a darker mystery lurking just out of reach? In the weeks that followed, Riverside attempted to find its footing again, but the undercurrents of unresolved pain carved deep grooves into the town's spirit. Pockets of solidarity emerged as friends held vigils in Lila's honor, gathering to share stories of her kindness while grappling with the fear of what might lie hidden in the shadow. It became clear that this tragedy, while rooted in a singular story, blossomed into a collective sorrow, a constant reminder of the fragility of life within their community. As dusk fell on the familiar streets, the lights flickering in homes no longer felt as safe, echoing the silence that now lay heavy in the hearts of all who had known and loved Lila Greene. Reflection. In the months that followed, life in Riverside settled into an uneasy rhythm. The absence of closure weighed heavily on its residents, leaving echoes of Lila Greene's laughter hanging in the air like lingering notes of a forgotten song. The trial's outcome had become a specter in their everyday lives, a reminder that justice is a delicate construct often thwarted by circumstance. Sheriff Ramirez found himself drawn to the river that snaked through the town, a quiet refuge where he could contemplate the unfolding aftermath. Standing at the water's edge, he watched as leaves floated aimlessly downstream, reflecting the bittersweet nature of lost beautiful yet impermanent. Each ripple in the water seemed to ripple through his own heart, whispering reminders of those he could not protect. The rage of unresolved questions tangled with the ache of understanding that some stories might never find closure. Lila's friends continued to honor her memory through small acts of kindness, creating a scholarship in her name to support local youth with artistic aspiration. They met often, holding candlelight vigils by the riverbank, shaping a community not just defined by grief, but by resilience and hope. As whispers of Caldwell faded into the past, the love for Lila forged connections that transcended pain. Riverside may have been marked by tragedy, but it was also a place where solidarity bloomed amid sorrow. The scars left by Lila's disappearance, while painful, became the catalyst for a deeper understanding of compassion and the importance of cherishing every moment spent together. With the river flowing steadily, Sheriff Ramirez took solace in the belief that while some answers remained buried beneath the surface, love and memory would guide the way.